Welcome back to Media Talks TV with your host, Tony J. Hope everybody's had a good weekend, good new year. As you know, it's Black History Month. And of course, I wanted to bring up the new Michael Jackson biopic that's coming in April of this year. Of course, there was a pushback it's supposed to come out October 2025, but they had to cut and reshoot a portion of the movie to, I think, according to sources, dealt with around the issue of Evan Chandler, which was one of Michael Jackson's first accusers and the 93 child molestation case that Michael Jackson endured. They had to cut certain things out of there because it was a gag order and they weren't supposed to speak about Evan Chandler, and they may not ever speak about Evan Chandler in the movie due to the fact that there's a gag order. And this is one of the things where, well, before I jump more into that, I want to talk about the trailer itself. I think it's going to be a good movie, and I think it's going to be one of these movies that is going to bring a lot of people back to the movie theaters because, of course, there's still a lot of love for Michael Jackson out there, and I guess people want to know the story behind Thriller, the making of Thriller. So I think that's a good tipping point to start off that movie of, well, the central point of the movie during Michael's rise to fame instead of focusing it all on his brothers, which, the biopic is long overdue because we never really got a true um Michael Jackson movie. We got the Jackson miniseries, which, a lot of black folks, they fondly still watch Jackson's The American Dream, and they still watch that on. It's still popular online and on Tubi and all these other major media outlets. They still watch it. So that's kind of like that miniseries been kind of like the gold standard of all the miniseries on uh Michael Jackson's life and growing up with his brothers. But of course, the 2004 biopic was utterly disgusting. And I feel like, um, we definitely had to clean that up. I don't think I could ever forgive Flex Alexander for that role for so many reasons. But the Michael Jackson biopic on VH1, the 2004 version, uh, that one was just horrible. It was horrible. I don't even think most people will speak about that biopic because it was just messed up all around. The casting was so wrong, and it was so bad that, even Michael Jackson himself, while he was still alive, didn't like the movie and how he was portrayed. I mean, they did him real dirty by casting Flex Alexander, but Flex Alexander was just as bad for even taking the movie because he wanted to make some money and he needed the money, so he took the role anyway. And we haven't seen Flex Alexander in any movie since that Michael Jackson biopic. I don't think he hasn't been casted in anything since that, you know. but we had do overs, and then of course the 2018 Lifetime movie Finding Neverland. That one was okay. I think it did a good job documenting the very last days of Michael Jackson's life, but it didn't document, the very end and how he ended up in the situation that he ended up in, what led to his death. And you know, with Lifetime movies, you're not going to get a perfect story. So Finding Neverland, the casting was okay, but still the narrative behind Michael Jackson's last days kind of got muddled towards the end. So we couldn't get a true biopic of the very last days of Michael Jackson's life, which were very tragic, which he was really trying to rebound his career after that second child molestation case. But now we got a new one which is coming out from Lionsgate, which I think is going to be better and probably much better than the last two. And I don't know how it's going to be done, but from sources that I've read, um, I've heard that they're going to split it into two parts. One is the first half is probably going to be about, the days of when he was making Thriller, his very album that gave him those Grammys, and then I guess they're gonna end it up over to maybe the first accusation, I believe 93. So it's probably going to go from 77 to 1993. I think that's all you're going to be able to fit into that movie without going over it, because anything over that would kind of, it will probably be an epic, but it will probably be a two. They saying there's going to be a sequel to the first part of it, and then of course the second part will probably go from 93 to his death and what led up to it. So we're probably going to get that, and you know it's probably going to take a while, but I would have preferred it to be on a streaming device as opposed to being in theaters, because then they would have had a much more space to actually tell the whole story. I don't know how they're going to make this into a movie where it's going to be it's going to cover every aspect. What I truly hope is it's not going to be too much of a focus on his brothers, but more of a focus on him as an individual, because his story is kind of separate from his brothers. And I've always wondered, like, when they talked about Michael Jackson, they always talked about him in terms of his four brothers, his family. But of course, with any other movie that comes out, there's going to be controversy. And of course, this movie isn't going to shy away from. I know for a fact this movie isn't going to be shying away from any type of controversy. But I highly doubt that they're going. Well, here's the bigger issue. Here's the bigger issue about the new biopic, which you should really think about. because the family has a lot of input into the movie, and of course the casting, because they cast Jafar as his uncle. Um, I believe that because the family has an involvement in the story, that certain things and certain aspects about Michael's life are going to be left out. And this is what probably won't make it a good like movie, because Michael has his side of the story and talking about his brothers and what he seen on tour when he was touring with his brothers. And then there's certain aspects of the lifestyle that they had while, of course, he was trying to verge out on his own. But the problem, what I find that's going to be problematic about the movie itself is how Joe Jackson is going to be portrayed in the movie. And this is where the sticking point is going to get to. And it's what I believe most people are going to kind of like have a side eye towards. There's certain parts that are going to be censored about how rough and how tough Joe Jackson was, because of course, Joe Jackson is not alive, and certain aspects of who Joe Jackson was compared to the first miniseries that we saw with Lawrence Hilton Jacobs. I think they're going to try and sugarcoat certain aspects of his hardness towards his kids and toward and in a sense the disciplinary aspect of who Joe Jackson was. And I think that's not going to make for a good movie because everybody knows what's been read or what's been said about Joe Jackson in the past by Michael. And it's going to be hard to look at that movie and see that they didn't that they hid something or that they controlled certain narrative about Michael Jackson's career. I feel like it's going to be, since the family is involved, that they're going to try and have a sanitized version of his career and stuff like that, and they're going to keep certain aspects of his life out. And of course, those aspects that they're not going to talk about is probably the first case and the second case. You know, um, also the artificial insemination process that he went through. Um, that's going to be the part that's going to be crazy because, like I said, he didn't have naturally birthed kids, so that's going to be even more far out the realm. I would be surprised how they're going to be able to handle that aspect of Michael Jackson's life, which is going to be crazy at that. But I don't know. I've seen all three biopics, and of course, all of us here are of the belief that the Jacksons, the American Dream movie was probably the best one. it gave you an honest look at Joe Jackson, but it didn't make Joe Jackson seem like a monster. Made Joe Jackson seem tough, but not like a monster in certain capacities. And that's the thing that we gotta understand, you know. And of course, the other two, the last two, they were just dog shit. Really, wasn't good anyway. So I don't blame anybody if they didn't want to watch those last two biopics about Michael Jackson. So I feel like this third one, well, this fourth one, of course, this is going on a fourth one, might be the very thing that we need to clean up Michael's image. And going through it, I think it's going to be, I believe it's going to be a good movie, but I don't want shit sugar coated neither. And that's what I'm worried about. Because when they had to reshoot the shit with Evan Chandler, I guess, you know, when it comes to legal matters and stuff like that, you don't want the movie to veer off into legal hot water. But that is what happened to Michael's life, and it cannot be glossed over, and it cannot be uh it can't be ignored, because it's what leads, it's those two cases is what leads to the destruction of his popularity and career, and what led to us getting those, mediocre albums in the mid 90s, because history and Blood on a Dance Floor was not it. Those were probably two worst albums that Michael made in his career, and then he came back with Invincible, and that kind of got him back on top. But that first case and then that second case, I don't know if how they're going to talk about it. Then the Martin Bashir interview, which led to the second case. So those things, you know, mm, it's gonna be a wild ride. You're gonna rehash some shit, and it's gonna be a wild ride. So hold on to your seats. I probably will go see it in the movie theaters. Probably will do that. I'm not making any promises. But this has been a Media Talks TV. Just wanted to check in, drop in. You tell me how you feel about this new movie, man. Drop a comment in the box. Let me know what you think. Make sure you share, like, and subscribe to the channel. We got more videos coming up. I know I haven't been posting up videos as consistently. Been working hard. So we'll be back next time. I'm Tony J. Peace.